Good morning, Dan and Amy. And while the D.C. press corps was rallying for itself and erecting strawman arguments,
stroking their own egos,
in between a little joking around, some of which was kind of funny, President Trump was in Harrisburg, PA, rallying the deplorables, as they were termed. And here's what he said about his first 100 days, adding a little context that you may have heard before from a previous president.
But to understand the historic progress that we've made, we must speak honestly about the situation that we and I inherited. Because believe me, the previous administration gave us a mess.
And he talked about taking the fight to sanctuary cities, keeping radical Islamic terrorists out of our country, what he's done in regulatory relief and putting people back to work, and his proposed tax plan, and the range of issues, and, of course, Neil Gorsuch, his confirmation to expect him to talk about. But I just, that line there about the mess he inherited, I don't find it particularly compelling for too long for a president to blame his predecessor. But I do find it delicious after 8 years of the left repeating what President Obama said to blame George W. Bush for everything that challenged the Obama administration, most of which was self-inflicted. I do find it's kind of enjoyable that President Trump is using the same tack that President Obama used. It'd be interesting to see the reaction you get to that from those in the left and the D.C. press corps. I repeat myself. And for more on this and the first 100 days, we're pleased to be joined by A.B. Stoddard, our friend, who's the associate editor and columnist at RealClearPolitics.com, and a Fox News contributor. A.B., thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And so what of the decision? Is this overblown? Is this navel-gazing by the D.C. press corps, President Trump's decision not to go to the correspondents' dinner on Saturday night? Does it really matter?
Well, I actually can tell you he was in Harrisburg telling the crowd that it was a bunch of D.C. elite media combined with Hollywood celebrities. There was no celebrities to be found. It's really interesting. And I actually thought that it was good to just focus the evening on a free press and the First Amendment protections and actually not have a president speak and then have a comedian make fun of him. So I think that the whole thing should shift away from celebrities and the president's appearance, and it should just be a dinner about, keeping a free press and fighting for the truth and fighting lies and that kind of thing. I thought it was much more low-key, and I don't think models and stars should come.
Yeah,
the president should come either.
Well, they hijack the event. I mean, I've seen it morph over the years where you'll have one celebrity and then, a decade later, now that's the cool thing to do. You want to be, there at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Did you attend the event?
Yes, I did, and it was definitely not cool. There wasn't a celebrity to be found.
So you like
Wolf
that?
Blitzer was there.
Oh.
No, I mean, he's a member of the media, guy.
I'm kidding.
We're kidding, but Don Lemon was there. No,
celebrity. That's part of the problem is, I mean, to continue your thread, AB, part of the problem is when these cable news anchors become celebrities or even contributors become celebrities, and then they think of themselves as celebrities, as provocateurs, not journalists.
Well, look, I think that, every one of us in the media is well aware of our reputation around the country. President Trump doesn't help us by saying they're a disgrace, they're dishonest, they're fake, and then secretly calling Maggie Haberman of the New York Times on his cell phone at night without his staff's permission. Okay? He needs the media. He loves the media. Should the media be careful about the way they behave, the facts they report, the tone that they use? All of that is their responsibility. I believe I tell the truth. I can only take care of myself. But and the comedian's message to us was, you have to up your game more than ever because he's out to get you. He's out to diminish and degrade a free press and erode more trust in institutions like the free press. And I think that, the media needs to be chastened by the fact that we are not trusted around the country. We need to up our game. But again, just because Donald Trump, who's obsessed with the media and wants to be at that dinner desperately, by the way, wants to run around and bash the media doesn't mean we need to pack it in and go home. I mean, every day we have to tell the truth. Every day we have to do our job correctly. a lot of us in the media could definitely use some improvement, but that doesn't mean in the age of a president who lies really just disturbingly frequently that we're just going to, go home. I mean, it's a real tension because he's working really hard to make sure that 4 years from now nobody believes anything.
Well, so he marked the 100th day in office by being 100 miles away from D.C. in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. What grade would you give him for his first 100 days?
Well, I think, that President Trump is struggling with the marker because he said it was really important. He had that contract with the voters, and he was going to deliver this and that. There's an emergency session of Congress, and, certainly the ACA, Obamacare will be repealed. There's a lot of promises that technically have not been delivered. He has not reached out to Democrats. He really hasn't tried. And he's dealing with a very divided, and the reason I mentioned Democrats is he's dealing with such a divided Republican Congress that it only emboldens the Democrats when, their divisions on the Republican side embolden the Democrats. He could actually, I think, pressure more Republicans by making some back channels with Democrats and working with them. And the government spending deal that came out overnight is a testament. Liberal groups are saying this is proof that it's good to fight Trump, because we got what we wanted and we backed him down. So that's an interesting thing for Republicans to consider and for President Trump to consider, is that not working with Democrats while they're so divided could, portend more problems down the road. I think that on foreign policy, he has leaned on these cabinet officials that everyone respects on both sides of the aisle and brought great comfort not only to the Republicans who support him, but to the people who don't support him in this town and around the country, who really were afraid of whether or not he would consult H.R. McMaster, James Mattis, John Kelly, and Rex Tillerson. And there seems to be a cohesive team that's struggling to define actual long-term strategies in these different countries. But certainly, I think that he's trying very hard, and he's working in a concerted, manner in a team setting with these sort of, grown-ups that everyone reveals, particularly the defense secretary. So I think that has actually, earned him a lot of plaudits across the country with people who voted for him or didn't vote for him. I think that the fact that there's been a staggering decrease in border crossings is a huge win for him. And unfortunately, it undercuts the need for a wall, and no one is interested in paying for a wall, but it is something for him to tout, no doubt. And I think that he has rolled back a lot of regulations, creating a lot of confidence in business and in people who own small businesses and in big businesses. We need to start hiring again. That the landscape will change. That obviously has to be followed up by real tax reform, and not just budget busting, deficit busting tax reform, but real reform, not just tax cuts. But the Republicans are hard at work on that, and Trump seems very committed to that and working very hard throughout his administration on that. Whereas maybe the original health care effort was kind of left to the Congress to implode. So I think he has things to tout for sure. He's in terms of his own supporters and the Republicans who are exposed in the midterm elections next year, voters will need to feel something by November 18th in terms of their health care or their wages and their taxes, and that's why those things are so important.
And so, what about Paul Ryan's grade? Because it seems to me Ryan is having trouble not just keeping Trump's promises, but keeping his own. And I point to the continuing resolution on Friday, which includes funding for Planned Parenthood, something that Paul Ryan said was a moral imperative to remove. Having difficulty whipping his caucus, even for, again, another example from last week, the Freedom Caucus endorses repeal 2.0, and he still, replace 2.0, I should say, and he still can't muster the votes, apparently, to call the question. It seems to me that Paul Ryan's leadership in the House is not measuring up to the times at this point.
That's an interesting thing about Paul Ryan. He inherited the same situation that John Boehner did, and although he was considered much more of a conservative insurgent himself, the author of the roadmap, someone who was calling for steep reforms in entitlements in order to shrink government. and cut taxes. This man has inherited the very same conference with the very same problem. So, he can jump up and down and scream and shout, but those divisions between the Tuesday group of moderates, particularly on the issue of health care, and the Freedom Caucus are deep and they're real and they're not going away. I mean, each side thinks the other side is crazy, and there's a lot of distrust politically, but also just on policy. They're worlds away, particularly on the issue of health care. And so, we can blame it on Paul Ryan, but no one wants to pass health care more than Paul Ryan. And the problem is that as the bill moved slightly more to the right, allowing the new bill, allowing more flexibility to the states in order to pick up votes from the Freedom Caucus, more moderates were scared off from it because they just genuinely believe they'll be left holding the bag next year at election time, having voted for something that will either threaten coverage for people with pre-existing conditions or definitely spike the prices of coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, and that they will at Paul Ryan's behest and everyone's behest, President Trump's taken a vote that died in the Senate. And House members, whether you think that's, wimpy or not, don't want to take a vote on something that will just become toxic and go off to the Senate sky. The whole health care thing needs to be taken out of Paul Ryan's hands. It needs to begin in the Senate, where the bill is ultimately going to change. And it needs to come over to the House. And my personal feeling is that the House should just pass a shell bill, like let's repeal the medical device tax and let's, do some small things. Send it over and then let the Senate sign it. No bill will get to President Trump's desk if it's just a Freedom Caucus bill from the House. So it has to be something that is going to work through the Senate and then can come back to the House and then get to Trump's desk.
All right. She is A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist at RealClearPolitics.com, as well as a Fox News contributor. A.B., thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.